Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I am a teacher and author, and this is English Nerd. It's been a while. I took a break for the summertime, but now I am back, and I want to talk to you all about characterization. It's another one of those words that English teachers really throw around a lot, and it's not always defined or explained, and so I wanted to explain what it is and give you a few examples as well. This is particularly helpful if you are, say, writing essays for AP Literature, but it can be used for a variety of different kinds of analysis as well. So essentially, characterization is the way that the author portrays a character. At its simplest, that's what it is. The reason that we look at characterization is to understand the characters better and also to be able to track their change over time, which is really what a story is. What has changed from the beginning to the end? Why bother telling the story at all? So characterization tends to connect not only to our understanding of the character, but to our understanding of the story as a whole, which again is really helpful when you're writing an analytical essay about a work or something. So, an author can portray a character in a variety of ways, the simplest of which are description, action, thoughts, and dialogue. So, if you're unsure about where to start, then you can think about breaking down those four things. Now, not every work has all of those four things. You think about plays, like works by Shakespeare, etc., and those are mostly dialogue, but there's a lot that you can glean from even one of those four. So, think about not only what the description of a character is, for example, but what that says about the character. Think about if you met somebody and they were wearing the outfit that this character is wearing, then what are some of the assumptions that you could make about their life? They may or may not be correct necessarily, but if somebody is wearing a Gucci suit, you can assume that they have money. Where did they get that? You can go deeper than just description or just action into why that matters and what that potentially says about the character, him or herself. So here are a few examples of what I consider to be great characterization. I think all of these examples that I'm going to show you are introductions to characters. That is a primo place to find the first important bits of characterization. The way a character is introduced, particularly in great literature, is going to tell us a ton about the character, so make sure to pay close attention. I'm going to begin with Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. These are just really fun in addition to being, famous for a reason, I guess. So I'm looking at the introduction of Sherlock Holmes himself. The story, of course, is told from John Watson's perspective, and he's looking for a place to stay, and he is recommended to stay with Sherlock Holmes, and here's how they meet. Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Stamford, introducing us. How are you? He said cordially, gripping my hand with a strength for which I should hardly have given him credit. You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive. How on earth did you know that? I asked in astonishment. Never mind, said he, chuckling to himself. The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine. It is interesting chemically, no doubt, I answered, but practically... Why, man, it is the most practical medico-legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us an infallible test for bloodstains? Come over here now. He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. Let us have some fresh blood, he said. I mean, that's such a beautiful introduction. Where do I even begin? Okay, so we have a few elements here. We don't have description, but we have action and we have dialogue, and those things tell us an enormous amount about Sherlock Holmes here. So he has this discovery about hemoglobin, so we can assume that he is scientifically a capable person. He's clearly passionate about these findings, especially the relationship between his scientific findings and his criminal justice, I guess, pursuits. But also he has a lack of social understanding in a way. He understands some things extraordinarily well. He understands that Watson has been to war in Afghanistan before Watson has a chance to explain just by observing. We find out later, of course. It's these small observations that Holmes has made to figure out what Watson has done. But also he drags him over to the table and says, let's have some fresh blood to practice this on, which is socially not an acceptable way to be. So there's a disregard for people, while there's also a keen sense of observation. I mean, the amount of information you get about this guy in just a short time is an extraordinary example of great characterization, just because of how well we can understand and start to infer about the person. And that's what a lot of good characterization does. It provides not only the text, but the subtext to understand someone. You're not being told that they're one way. I mean, maybe you are, but you're also shown these depths to what that entails. All right, so next up I have the Canterbury Tales. Unfortunately, as I was going back to the Canterbury Tales, I realized that it's written in Middle English, so I'm going to try to find a portion that I can read with relative ease that still translates well into modern English, but I wanted to look at part of the description in the general prologue about the wife of Bath, who is an iconic character in literature. She is extremely famously well fleshed out as this character who both upholds negative female stereotypes but also rejects and kind of transcends those stereotypes as well. She's just a very interesting early example of a female character who actually has agency and actually has great characterization and isn't either a positive or negative sort of stand-in. So let's take a walk here into Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the general prologue, which introduces all of the pilgrims going on the Canterbury Way. So part of the description that we get is this. So this is going to sound a little bit stilted because, again, this is written in Middle English, so I'm trying to modernize things a bit for you on the fly, which is an interesting challenge, but we'll see how it goes. It says that her kerchiefs full fine were of a nice texture. I would dare swear that they weighed 10 pounds, that on a Sunday were upon her head. Her hose were of fine scarlet red, full, tightly tied, and very soft and new. Her face was bold and fair and red of hue. She was a worthy woman all her life. Husbands at church door she had 5, without other company to speak of in youth. But there's no need to speak about that at present. And she had been to Jerusalem 3 times. Okay, so this is a very different kind of description. It's literally just a description. We get a description of what she's wearing and a couple things about her life. We don't see any actions. We don't get any thoughts or dialogue in this section. So what can you do with just description? Again, I'm sorry about the stilted way that I read that, but I'm not going to apologize too much. I mean, it's Middle English. So some of the things to pay attention to are the kerchief. She has this hat, essentially, that is humongous, and it says specifically that she wears it on Sundays. So on Sundays, she would be going to church, she would be seen by a lot of people, and so you get the sense that she likes the attention. Otherwise, why would she wear a hat or a kerchief that looked like it weighed 10 pounds? I mean, that definitely draws the eye. Not only that, but she also has her hosiery that she's wearing on her legs is this bright red color, and there's a tight fit. So she has no problem showing off at least portions of her body and making sure that all eyes are on her, even in moments when you're supposed to be pious and all of that. She's been to Jerusalem 3 times. But that information comes right after we find out that she has been married 5 times, not to mention other company in youth that she had. So she definitely enjoys the gentleman, shall we say. And so already there's a little bit of maybe suspicion about her motivations for going on these various pilgrimages to Jerusalem. Is it for purely pious reasons? Is it to be seen? And so, I mean, you have to read the rest of the description and then her tale to get a better sense of who she is. But we get some really juicy characterization just from the initial description of her as she's riding along among the other pilgrims in the group. So yeah, that one's fantastic as well. All right, this one, once again, is quite different. I wanted to mix up the kinds of examples that I was giving you today. So this one is from The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. If you've been around the channel, you know that this is a book that I tend to bring up quite a lot as an example for a variety of things that are done really well, because it's just such an unusual story, and the strength of it, in my opinion, is the characters. They just have stuck with me since I read it in 2018, 19, so it's only been a few years, but they still are some of my go-to examples of a beautiful kind of characterization. So we're going to look at some of the boys, the Raven Boys, and their initial descriptions here. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm not a big fan of the way that they formatted this book. It's just kind of, it makes noises. Anyway, it's a personal issue, I guess. So the scenario that you get here in chapter 2 of The Raven Boys is that Gansey is on the side of the road next to his broken down bright orange Camaro, and he's on the phone with one of his roommates, Ronan Lynch. On the other side of the phone, his roommate, Ronan Lynch, replied, "You missed World Hist. I thought you were dead in a ditch." Gansey flipped his wrist around to examine his watch. He had missed a lot more than world history. It was 11 o'clock, and already the chilliness of last night seemed improbable. A gnat was stuck in the perspiration on his skin next to the watch band. He flicked it off. Gansey had camped once when he was younger. It had involved tents, sleeping bags, an idling Range Rover parked nearby for when he and his father lost interest. As an experience, it had not been anything like last night. He asked, "Did you get the notes for me?" "No," Ronan replied. "I thought you were dead in a ditch." Gansey blew grit off his lips and readjusted the phone against his cheek. He would have gotten notes for Ronan. The pig stopped. "Come get me." Okay, now there is just this whole chapter is really exceptional in terms of characterization, once again. But even this very brief initial exchange tells us quite a lot. We get that Ronan is not the studious type. He only mentions one class that Gansey missed in school, even though it was several classes that he missed. He only mentions one. He didn't get him notes, and he's kind of dismissive, like, "Well, I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead." So you start to get a sense of Ronan pretty early on. Gansey, you also start to get a sense of. He's next to his Camaro. He mentions only having camped once. And it was a pretty cushy situation. It wasn't roughing it. It was, let's try this out, and if we get bored, we can always leave and do something more interesting. He seems to have a bit of money. Just, you get that sense here, and then, of course, in the rest of the chapter, but he has this nice watch. He likes to keep things kind of clean. He gets rid of the dust and the gnat, and he's kind of aware of appearing nice, even as he's standing next to his broken down car on the side of the road. So yeah, it was tough to choose which section to talk about with this book, because the whole thing is just unbelievably good in terms of character, but there's just a little teaser, I guess. And then I'm going to give you one more because I'm generous like that. And this one is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is another book that tends to come up a lot when I talk about great books and great characters. But this one is just another masterclass in character. In fact, I'm thinking about all of the books that I've ever read, and character-wise, Dostoevsky, he definitely makes top 2, if not number 1, because he creates these characters that feel more like people than characters. They have these intense contradictions. Their moods will shift wildly, and it doesn't feel inconsistent like it does with other authors who do something like that, but instead it feels more just like real people are, and how they have mood shifts, and their ways of responding might change. I mean, it's just masterful. So let's look at this description of him. In fact, let's not look at the description so much as his thoughts. Since we've looked at action, description, dialogue, let's look at some of those interior thoughts and see what can be gleaned from those. So this is chapter 1 in my book. It's page 1, so super early on. We get a look at our protagonist, our main character, Raskolnikov, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. So he has just gone out of his teeny tiny little closet apartment and snuck past the landlady to whom he owes money, and now he is wandering through the streets. This time, however, he reached the street feeling astonished at the intensity of his fear of his landlady. To think that I can contemplate such a terrible act and yet be afraid of such trifles, he thought, and smiled strangely. Yes, a man holds the fate of the world in his 2 hands, and yet, simply because he is afraid, he lets things drift. That is a truism. I wonder what men are most afraid of. Any new departure, and especially a new word, that is what they fear most of all. Okay, so this is an interior monologue in the making. Our first look inside the head of the main character, and there's a lot to unpack here. There's a touch of megalomania, an inflated sense of self, because he is thinking he holds the fate of the world in his 2 hands, and here he is, this poor ex-student who's afraid of his landlady. So there's already this juicy contradiction between him fearing encountering real people and then thinking that he is above them, and we're wondering, okay, what are you contemplating and why aren't you naming it? And this is feeling really ominous, like you're thinking about doing something pretty terrible, but you get the sense that he thinks about these big cerebral ideas. What are men most afraid of, and he has come to this, he's contemplating something that has arisen from those grand thoughts. So once again, a lot of information that you can dig into with this example. So I know that was a lot of examples. I hope it was helpful for you. These are the kinds of details that you can pull out and really use to explain who a character is at their core, and why does that matter to the story as a whole? What kind of a story is Dostoevsky telling by really spending a good amount of time inside the mind of someone who contemplates dark and theoretical things? What kind of a story is Arthur Conan Doyle telling by having this brilliant, erratic character at its center? So there's just a lot that you can do with characterization. All right, that is it for now. Make sure to like this video if you like it, and definitely subscribe. Every Monday I will have writing and literature English class-based videos for you that I think you're really going to enjoy this year. So that is it. Until next Monday.